All right, everyone, thank you so much for being here today. I apologize for the delay. We're starting 10 minutes late, but we did want to make sure that everyone who wanted to attend the meeting could attend. We realized that there was a glitch with the link and wanted to give people time to join the meeting, given the important discussions we'll be having today. So to begin, the meeting will begin at 5:40 p.m. I'll call this meeting to order at 5:40 p.m. I'll start off with a roll call vote. Sonia Grace?
Here, can we let in Glenda? Glenda, she's in the meeting, but as an attendee. We can bring her in as a panelist, please. Great.
Thank you. So Sonia Grace? Present.
Here.
Brian Estrada?
Present.
Brenda Liz Colon?
Present.
Hugo Figueroa?
Present.
And Diosa Martinez?
Present.
Okay, we have a quorum. And Andrew Bramson did let me know that he did have a conflict today, so he will not be in attendance. So the next item on the agenda is the consideration of the meeting minutes of November 5th, 2020. We did receive those in our packet, so I will entertain a motion to approve.
So moved. So moved.
I heard so moved by Brian Estrada and a second by Hugo Figueroa. Any comments, discussions, questions? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 You guys have it. The meeting minutes for November 5th have been approved. Of course, I forgot to do this right at the beginning, but I want to just remind attendees who are here who want to listen to the meeting in another language. I want to just do that quick interpretation. Para los que nos acompañan hoy que quisieran escuchar la reunión en español o en portugués, pueden hacer clic abajo donde dice Interpretation y cuando hagan clic pueden escoger español o portugués. Sonia, do you mind doing the Portuguese?
Não. Para as pessoas que estão a ver a reunião, que queiram em português, podem clicar abaixo onde diz Interpretation e escolhem a língua portuguesa ou a língua espanhola, como quiser.
Great, thank you. The next item on the agenda is the consideration of personnel actions, including any new appointments, layoffs, rescissions, resignations, recalls, and retirement. I will entertain a motion to approve. We'll do a second, and then we will have a discussion if Dr. Toledo wants to add any context. So can I get
the personnel
I'll
actions.
entertain a motion to approve.
Motion to approve the personnel actions.
Second.
A motion made by Sonia Gray, seconded by Brian Estrada. Any questions or comments from board members?
So, Dana, could you speak to the nurses vacancies where we stand once we add this one?
Yes, excited to say this is going to be the 5th nurse on the team. So we, which actually brings us equal to where we've been for many years. We had always split a nurse between 2 schools pre-pandemic, but we are still working to hire a 6th nurse given the context of the pandemic so that every school would have their own dedicated nurse. But this has been really exciting to now be up to 5, and with only 4 schools in person this currently, it gives us an opportunity to have head nurse Marie Grist, who is invaluable, be supporting so many new nurses to our CFSD community. And so she has really been rotating and coming alongside each of those nurses. So we're very pleased with how quickly we've been able to staff up this new cadre of school nurse teachers.
Any other questions or comments? I always have this question after I read the after I read the personnel memo, is how many vacancies do we have? Wondering if you could speak to that.
Sure. We have, so one more nurse to hire, and then I believe we are down to one more special educator. Anne, can you speak to, am I saying the number of teacher vacancies right, that we're just down to one?
Currently 2.
Two.
Mhm.
Okay.
And then one other comment I just want to make is there's still a few weeks left, but on this memo does announce the retirement of Roberta Emery, who has been a teacher in the district with us for 33 years. And so just want to thank her now and more thoroughly at the end of the month when she wraps up her service. But this will be the last board meeting before Roberta retires. And so we're just so grateful for all of her years leading her students, but also being a real teacher leader, having had a role as a coach in the district, and she's worn many hats to contribute. So we're really grateful for all she's done for CFSD.
Great. Yes, thank you, Roberta, for your 33 years of service. We appreciate it. Great. Any other thoughts or comments on this personnel memo? Okay, so hearing none, the motion was made by Sonia Grace. It was seconded by Brian Estrada. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, the personnel memo has been approved. The next item on the agenda is the Central Falls School District budget. Item 4A, consideration of bills, grants, and general budget. I will turn it over to Dr. Toledo and or Vice Chair Grace to speak on that.
Vice Chair Grace, anything?
Nope. So I received the packet of bills with our packet of information, and I reviewed it and I didn't see anything. Just need to finish through. Takes a little bit longer when it comes electronically to go back and forth with the pages. So it feels like it should be easier, but it's really not, because I read the signatures on the first page, but the backup is 3 pages behind it. So it's taken me a little bit longer just to add my signatures, but just as I reviewed it, I didn't see anything out of the ordinary, and I support approval.
All right, so I will entertain a motion to approve the bills, grants, and general budget. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
So moved by Sonia Grace. Do I have a second? A second by Glenda Liz Colon. Any questions or discussion for Sonia or Dr. Toledo? Hearing and seeing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Okay, the bills, grants, and general budget passes. Item 4B is the fiscal year 21 budget review update and discussion. I will turn it over to Dr. Toledo and or Director Simmons.
And I'll just call up your slides, Director Simmons, and hand it over to you.
Thank you. All righty. So good evening, Madam Chair, board members, and Central Falls community. This is our update for the month of December for our FY21 budget. I'm not sure if everyone recalls, but usually about once a year, I go through our methodology of how we're tracking our finances, where we stand, and so people get a better understanding of how the budget flows. And I'm also going to give an outlook for the rest of the year. So what you see right now is just the summary sheet of a number of different spreadsheets that are behind it. What's up top in green is the revenue portion. What's down below in pink are expenditures. So revenue, money, expenditures, cost. And what's in yellow, those are projections for the remainder of the year. What I would like to point out is that, our state aid comes off of our per pupil allocation. However, without having a budget for the school district for the year, it's at about 90%, I believe, of what it was last year. But that's pretty much what we're going to get for state aid. The other portion I want to point out is our stabilization aid. So, as Central Falls becomes a more robust community in terms of attracting businesses, and the future outlook of, just a promising city, at the end of the day, that 6.7 million would be what is expected from the city via the taxpayer dollars or business taxes to come back to the school districts. That's what stabilization aid is. Within this slide as well, we were able to retain last year, and it's still going through the final stages of approval, our audit, our FY20 audit, but we were able to maintain a fund balance of $338,000. So I'm very grateful for all the efforts with all the heartaches and hardships that the teachers put forth in terms of, it seemed like they were penny pinching and, didn't want to use the ream of paper, but at the end of the day, it really helped us to be in a better position for this year, especially in an unstable environment of the pandemic. Down below, you can see salaries and or the expenditures, but you see the salaries and benefits. Per usual, those are always our two biggest buckets, and it's not just Central Falls. Almost in any business, your two biggest buckets are salaries and benefits. Salaries are generated from the CBA for the most part, the collective bargaining and whatever agreements that union employees are tied to. And benefits, it's usually a percentage, whether or not it's medical, dental, taxes, usually a percentage of the salary. So those are kind of fixed. And within the other purchase services, that's where you kind of see our, I don't have the number offhand, pardon me, but that's where you see, the numbers that flow, not just from the district to businesses, but also to charter schools, because the money does follow the student. So at the end of the day, my projection for this year is that we will be about $928,000 short. However, before anyone gasps, I want to say that that is a good thing. It's a good thing as of right now. One, because RIDE has already been notified of it. I've already talked to the person of finance there. Two, as long as we can spend, and I'll get to this a little bit later, but as long as we can spend every COVID dollar, every ESSA dollar, and they give us that $928,000, you'll see that we're saying we have a need for the $46 million that we were campaigning for the last year and a half or so. So we're not in a bad position. Our cash flow this year because of COVID is actually better. You can see at the bottom where it says total summary, it shows that we may not need any assistance from RIDE until May. Normally that happens around February or March. So we are in a good position, maybe not ideal, but we are in a good position as of right now in terms of everything that I can see. I'm sure there are things I can't see. Whoever has a crystal ball, you can share it with me and open up my eyes. Next slide, please. Thank you, Superintendent. So on this slide, this is mimicking the first slide that you see. Some people deal better with seeing numbers, other people deal better with seeing pictures. On the right side of the pie or the cylinder, so to speak, is or donut, that's what it's called, donut chart, is the revenue. That's the state aid, the stabilization, and the Medicaid. Those are our three big buckets. On the left side, you can see the salary and benefits. And if you were to add up all the percentages, it will just show that our expenditures on the left a little bit outweigh our revenue on the right. But you know, just so everybody knows, that is where, in visual form, that is where our finances tend to go. Next slide, Superintendent. So here are the takeaways that I'm asking that we kind of focus on tonight, unless there are additional questions from Madam Chair and fellow board members, is that for our CARES Act, we were allotted to request $1.8 million. We've drawn down on $1.2 million of that 1.8, and that 1.2 is actually come to us from RIDE. It's not like we're waiting for it. It actually came to us. Those funds, however, while they do not give a surplus to our operating budget, they do alleviate normal expenditures of the operating budget. For example, we know that we needed computers. So normally, you know, the tech director and myself and the superintendent would have a discussion on how much the tech director could purchase, and that would come out of the operating budget. But because of the CARES Act, that money is coming straight from that fund and not touching the operating budget. So we're grateful that, you know, we've been able to be a conduit of resources that we needed with that $1.2 million. The ESSER funds, while we know that that lasts a year and a half, again, we are trying to utilize it all this year purposely to show RIDE. One, there is a need. Secondly, you know, there are, as you can see, the governor relief funds haven't even been released yet. And so, yeah, with the ESSER funds, part of it is going to cover some of our costs from last year, we hope, that were taken away when the CARES Act was given. So we hope to have a better fund balance at the end of the day, and I'll give an update on that as we get more clarity around it in terms of working with RIDE and submitting our reimbursements. Moving to the annual audit. So I just received, before this meeting, sign off from the Department of Administration on our fiscal side of the audit. There may be a little bit of an amendment for the disclosure, for the wording of the financials, but in terms of the numbers and where we ended off at the end of the day, they have signed off on it, and then it will go to RIDE, and in tandem, I'll share that with the board. So sorry for the hold up there. However, in terms of the CARES Act, it required different type of disclosure, different type of statement within the financials. So it took longer than normal. Finally, eyes on the prize, got to remain focused. I know sometimes, you know, things may not appear to be what we want them to be, and that's fine. I get that. Very, very seldom does life ever work out where it's all of what we want. However, we talked again, and I'm going back to the first slide, we talked that we wanted $46 million for this year. So if we spend the $42.6 million that I have estimated and the CARES Relief Fund at $1.8 million and the ESSER Fund at $1.5 million, we are roughly at about 41.9 million or 42 point something million, with only a remaining balance of $179,000. So here's my, I guess my end of the day statement is that we said we needed $46 million. I don't care how RIDE gives us the $46 million. If they give it to us in CARES funds, if they give it to us in ESSER, governor relief funds, a grant here, a grant there. Bottom line, we need $46 million. So I know that, you know, we're normally supposed to see it in our state aid and the stabilization aid. For me, in my shoes, at the end of the day, I don't care how you provide the money, provide the finances so that we can fund the district, and then we're okay. So that's my update to the board. From what I can see, it's a promising update. And I want to thank the superintendent, specifically the director of operations, the director of technology, because the heat has been heavy on them to make sure that we spend these funds before the deadline. So thank you all. And I guess if there are any questions, I'll attempt to answer.
Yeah, thank you so much. You know, Director Simmons, you always have a way of updating us on the finances with a little, like, you know, positivity. And I think we could all use that. We could all use that every now and then. So I really appreciate that. I do have some follow-up questions, but I want to see if any of the other board members have anything that they'd like to ask. Sonia?
Thank you. So 2 questions. One is to the audit. So did you say you're going to speak to us about it later, or are there any things that you saw? Were there any comments that we received? Do we have a management letter? Anything that came out of it that you think are things for us to change, or things you'd like to improve on, or maybe implement moving forward? And will we have a conversation about that in the future? If we are, you can push it to them. If not, if you don't mind giving me just sort of a little overview.
No problem. We definitely will have a conversation about it. One thing that I can say that that we're in a better position of is actually moving our finance server from on-site to the cloud via the CARES Act. And I know that that was a finding, and just in terms of what do you call it, a risk from when we did our NIJ audit, as well as with RIDE, and, you know, with our current audit. There's always just a risk when things are not automated. But as of right now, I don't have anything that I want to add additionally. I'd rather read through the management letter, because their concerns may be above and beyond or less than my concerns.
Okay. And then I have another one.
Mhm.
So to your point of 46 million, however we get them, I want to go back to the cuts that we had done last year, and how much of this 46 million is able to fill the holes that we were made to have based on the cuts that we had done the previous year. And then, are there any restrictions in these grant funds that prevent us from doing the thing? So there are curricular things that we had to cut. There were programs that we did not implement. There were things that we scaled back. And my understanding is that some of these grant funds, even though they're money that come in to supplement some projects, are not open-ended and have serious restrictions that prevent us from doing the work that we want to do. So that if we had to have a budget that really reflected our needs, it would be 46 plus to be able to do all that. So I really do appreciate the look at it, and like, we'll go for the money. I just want to keep that on the table, if that is true, something that there are restrictions for those grant funds that are keeping us from doing the things we wanted to.
My answer to that is absolutely, you're right, Sonia. I guess my expectation of myself, the team, the cabinet, of the superintendent is that we use whatever intelligence that we have to allow those funds that are restricted to move in the operational budget where the restriction lies,
Mhm.
and then to move out of the operational budget the funding to other places. So for example, we know that I want to say the CRF and the ESSER are heavily focused on tech. So if they're going to fund technology, and again, technology is an easy one because everyone needs a device at this point in time with all this hybrid learning or distance learning. But if they're going to fund a tech budget, then I don't need to have that line, those finances sitting on that line. Those finances can go to funding for staff or something else within the budget that it's not confined to the grant. So at that point in time, I say it becomes on us to be good stewards and to be creative and to really allocate smoothly. The hardest part in full transparency of the CRF relief grant versus the ESSER funds is that it has to be expended by December 31st. So it did not necessarily allow us to really have those deep dive conversations of a shift. Of course, $46 million unrestricted would be awesome. I just believe in the team and the fact that I think that however they throw us the $46 million, I think we are creative enough and even willing to ask RIDE when it's pushing the envelope to say, hey, listen, can we use the funds in another way? And some of those funds we're able to replenish, as you are asking, some of the heartaches and cuts we had to make last year, i.e. the nurses. You know, it was able not just to fund the nurses that we had, but also to provide an additional, I think, 2, as well as maybe some, what do you call it, some mental counseling, if we needed it within the district, just, you know, to help the kids and the staff through this period of time. So while the funds, yes, are restricted, I think also sometimes with that, it requires us to read the regulations, and it might cause us to look at the funding differently and maybe provide a need that we had not thought of.
And if I can just build on Director Simmons's comments that I think very accurately captured the sort of situation. To your question, Vice Chair Grace, there are still definitely things that we cut in last year's budget and have not replaced. And I think that the one that I certainly feel most is like roles that we cut. So, you know, we still don't have a director of multiple pathways or a chief academic officer, or roles that like really we talk about often as being needs. But we have been able to do things that are urgent priorities, but we would never have even dreamed we could have, because we never would have pictured $1 million to support tech, right? So as Director Simmons was just saying, we've been able to honestly put such considerable funds to not only replenishing and building out our fleet of devices, but also like a lot of things that are invisible. So significant investments in our tech infrastructure will be happening because of some of these funds that were, 5 years overdue, and yet we never and 5 is probably kind. I mean, Carrie talking about shifting the finance server into the cloud, like when it would rain, we'd all be holding our breath that we were going to lose every bit of finance information that the district had, because, anytime the lights went out, it was like, this could be the last time we ever see that server in functional order. So these things have been like urgent, and yet never even in our wildest dreams have they been able to be attended to. So I really believe, especially in the tech domain, we will come out of the pandemic considerably stronger than we went in.
Any other questions? Sonia, did you have another question? No. Anyone else have any questions? Ugo, I think you're raising your, yep, go ahead.
Yeah, now that you guys are talking about tech, I would like to know how much exactly we are spending on like hardware, hotspot, just in IT. How much are we spending a month? Any idea?
I don't have that number off the top of my head in a month. I know what was dedicated to it from, matter of fact, no, I don't know it off the top of my head. I know Michael did give me that number, but I don't have it in front of me.
What I would also say is it's inconsistent because as we're learning about needs, we're also, I think, trying to be as responsive as possible. So I would say, so for example, with some of the remaining funds, now that we're in the last 30 days of being able to spend some of this money, we're thinking about with anything left, how can we, even prepay for, additional, like build out the hotspots to have enough data to carry families, through the school year and things like that. So I wouldn't say it's been consistent any month since the pandemic for some of those expenditures. Also, there are a few, it's a dance with all of these grants every day because we're very grateful, but there is some money that we believe we're going to be getting from the state that would additionally support tech infrastructure. So all that to say, it seems like a simple question, but we have been playing a bit of a game of chess to try to optimize all the funds. So it's a moving target of how much we're spending each month.
Because I know for hotspot, we've been spending like $15,000 a month,
Yeah.
right? So
Oh, a month?
a month. Yeah.
No,
We have not.
no.
We were able to get a very large donation from T-Mobile and Cox, and then we're simultaneously working on the project of putting the towers on CalCut to try to be getting citywide Wi-Fi, although it's a process. But no, we've never spent that much a month.
Is there a way to have like a I don't know if we have one of these schools empty, like the high school or another school, and they can put one of those towers there maybe, and we can bring like a few students, as long as they do the distance and using masks. Can we do that? So because I know we are spending a lot of money on hotspots. So I just want to know if there's a way to set up like a building, so we can centralize it,
Yeah, that's a great idea, and it's actually a project we're working on. So the way that the mapping worked out, they said CalCut would be the best place for this massive tower, but then anyone with a district device would be able to connect into it. So the first pilot of that will get started by the last day of the calendar year. So we're like within weeks of standing up this 900-pound antenna on CalCut's roof. But I can't commit to that it'll be citywide come January 1, but the tower will be up there. And then to your point, proximity to CalCut would enable people to have that Wi-Fi, but hopefully with the size and the power of the antenna, that it would actually give access citywide. So that's the goal, is to stop relying on hotspots and create a citywide solution. But we're only the second district in the country, so there's a lot still to learn from these towers. So we're cautiously optimistic, but they keep reminding us that they don't have, we would become the proof point if it can really work.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
All right. Any others?
Very quickly, I just want to say, and thank you for the question and thank you for the clarification, Dr. Toledo. Hotspots does not come out of our operational budget. I would like to say that CARES does pay for that. And out of that, we set aside about 300,000, although I do hear and respect the need. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So I have just quick points. I sort of think you mentioned in your presentation that you were keeping the state aware of the potential 928,000 that we might be short.
Yeah. Yes.
And it prompted in my head a question about what do the conversations about FY22 look like? Because, you know, as we figure out what's going to happen with FY21, not knowing when the General Assembly is going to act, by this point, in a sort of non-pandemic year, we're already sending numbers, right? We're already sending numbers to the state for the next fiscal year. And so curious about that, whether those conversations have begun and what we're worried about with FY22, because my guess is that the CRF and ESSER isn't going to be, right, that's not going to exist. Maybe it will, maybe not. You know, I think about those uncertainties around that budget. And then the last thing is just, it would be really helpful. Your presentation is so thorough, like you walk us, you explain it so well. I would love, to the extent that you have the capacity to, Director Simmons, to accompany your table with like a short budget narrative that if board members want to review that table again after the meeting, we still have that narrative sort of side by side that we can point to. Does that make sense?
Sure.
And it doesn't have to be long, but it would be helpful to sort of kind of have like a summary of what that table is telling us that we can have even after the meeting.
No problem at all.
That's all I have. I don't know if you have any comments around sort of our thoughts for FY22.
My answer is
maybe your brain isn't there yet.
No, it's fine. It's fine. The answer's kind of short though. All the business officials around the state met with RIDE, I want to say maybe about last month, and we're all in a place of, I don't know where we land for FY22, and everyone's talking about the crippling effects that it has on budgeting, because this is actually budget season for most districts in terms of when they start to build out what they need and start talking to the stakeholders of the towns or the town. So I don't know at this point in time. The best or the most optimistic outlook that I have is the fact that more than any other district, RIDE knows the plight and the need of Central Falls. So I'm just hoping that it's not lost in, you know, I guess in commonality of knowing, but there's no district who knows where we're gonna land for FY22 because no budget has even been passed for FY21. And as far as I know is that that meeting is to happen sometime in January.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I'm not seeing any other hands raised. So we can move on to item 5. Thank you, Director Simmons.
Thank you.
Item 5A is the face mask policy. This will be our second reading of the policy, which means that we will be voting. We will be taking a vote on it tonight. Dr. Toledo, did you want to kind of give us a summary? Did anything change from the first reading?
No, I was just closed my screen too soon because I had a slide for it. So let me try to share that again. But no, nothing really. The verbiage, nothing has changed. No other cases statewide that would impact the language, which was the only thing that impacted the first draft. So it reads as it did last time.
Okay. So I will entertain a motion to approve, and then we'll do a second and then a discussion. Motion to approve. Oh, Dr. Toledo, did you want to walk us? Did you want to walk us through something first?
I was just, bringing it up as a visual, but no,
Okay.
The slide exists, so I figured I'd pull it up. But it's the same as last month.
Okay, so I'll entertain a motion to approve. Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion made by Sonia Grace, a second by Hugo Figueroa. Now we can have a discussion, ask questions. Brian, I think I saw your hand up.
Books. So last time I had brought up, I know you said something about the verbiage, but I'm looking at section 5 and that wasn't changed.
Yeah.
Regarding so when a staff member or student is either alone in a room or office or alone with parents or guardians, it was like the way that it was written, I feel like can be seen as kind of confusing. Specifically, like the part, I don't know if it's like the use of like comma or something,
Sure.
but thinking about separating student from teacher, because it's
Okay.
teacher alone or the student with family alone. It's a very simple change, but I know since this is a policy, I want to make sure that that's
I
something
appreciate you flagging it. Now that you say it, remember it, but I did not see it in my notes from last time, which is telling me I need to think of new systems to capture it all while doing this. So
Okay.
thank you.
Of course.
And I guess I don't know what, then I mean, another comment that we had talked about sort of the sunsetting language. And I don't know if that was added as part of this, that we did speak about COVID-19 pandemic, but there's no time frame specific to it. So I wasn't sure where and how we put that in.
Yes, I did ask our legal counsel about that one, and people have differing perspectives on how long we might be in the mask wearing phase. But I do think, to your point, we can get something in there, even if it's very vague, because it may
And
be.
that's fine. I mean, if our legal counsel doesn't think we need it, that's fine. You know, even if we're in a mask wearing phase for a long time. I mean, do they think that we be in this phase beyond the pandemic is still being considered in a pandemic? Then the first sentence would sort of negate that, because that's what it says. It speaks to the COVID-19 pandemic. So if the idea is that we will be outside of a quote like the formal pandemic, but still wearing masks, then we would need to change that sentence. You know what I mean? Does it make
Yeah,
sense?
no, that makes sense. It's having never lived through a pandemic, it's hard to say how one defines the end of it. So let me know if you guys prefer. I can make these 2 tweaks and bring it back to you at the next month, because that is my error. I did not have that in my notes at all.
But we can make them we can amend them.
Okay,
We can amend them
whatever
here.
you
So,
prefer.
Brian, you can propose an amendment to the sentence in the form of a motion, and we'll just approve that amendment and then the second one and then approve it. So you don't have to take it back and make that if we have things on, we can do it on the floor. That would just move it forward, I think.
So because I have a motion and a second for the approval, I would ask those people to rescind their motions.
They don't have to, we can
Okay.
just motion to amend.
Okay, so Sonia and Hugo, if you could rescind your motion and your second.
I'll rescind my motion.
I motion.
Okay,
I would-
and Bryant, if you want to just make a motion with your amendment, you could even say, you know, I amend the policy, the policy to reflect the suggested change to the sentence to Dr. Toledo, and we'll know what it means.
Sorry, that was a lot. So you said, so I propose, or did you say I amend?
Yep.
Actually,
I make a
Sonia-
motion to amend.
Motion to amend.
Okay. So I'd like to, or did you say you'd propose a motion to amend?
So I'll say it, and then you can say so moved. So I will entertain a motion to amend the face mask policy to reflect the suggestion made by board member Brian Estrada regarding the sentence structure to Dr. Toledo.
Okay, so moved.
Do I have a second?
Can we just, I think we should just rewrite it. If we're gonna approve, we should know what's there. Like, so
Wait, I'm confused.
the amendment should say what the sentence is gonna read as.
Oh, okay, okay.
So if
So
we're
then we
gonna
would have to pull that up.
actually say what the amendment is.
So can y'all, you guys can hear me? Okay. So the sentence right now states, when a staff member or student is either alone in a room or / office or alone with parents or guardians, they may remove their face covering. I'm wondering if changing it to when a staff member is is alone in a room or office, or a student is either alone in a room or office or alone with parents, so that there is that separation between the staff member being alone with the parents, or because it's like staff member or student, it would put those together versus two different circumstances. That makes sense. So I don't know, like, if it's just like a placing of a comma or if it's just a total rewording.
Okay. What's the easiest way to do this then?
Superintendent, what is the
Actually, the
sentence
deep-
trying to say?
Huh?
What is the sentence trying to say?
I'm pulling it up as we speak.
The section B or section 5.
When a staff member or student is either alone in a room or alone with parents, they may remove. So the clarification is perhaps it's the room / office that's getting it jumbled, or
I think just the act of having both staff member and student as a or right there, and then having the or again can literally just mean like pretty much take out student, and then it's like when a staff member is either alone in a room or alone with parents.
how about if I copy and paste that whole sentence again, and one will be when a staff member is alone, and then the next will be when a student is alone, but it'll capture both.
Perfect. And then the student
Yeah,
will just put the parents part, and the staff member don't put the parents part.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's the clearest way to do it.
Awesome.
Okay. And I'm live editing in the policy, so if anyone else is in there, they'll see the change. When a staff member. Okay. Office. When a student. Okay, thank you.
You can probably take off the either for the first one, since it's just one alone, whereas the other one is with parents as well.
Say, you said remove an I?
No,
Is that-
either.
Say it again?
So I don't know if you can see when I highlighted, but when a staff member is either alone in a room / office,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if the either is necessary there.
Oh, the either word.
Since
Yeah.
room and office are combined into one. That's that's more wording. It's not.
No,
it's
no,
not-
no. I was hearing I, not either, which is why I was like looking for the I.
That was the-
Thank you. Okay, and then to Vice Chair Grace, recommendation will also at the end add a sunset clause, or
I don't think we have to. I think leave it as that. I think it's fine. I think it should be fine. I'm okay with it.
Okay, so then Brian, you're making that motion to amend.
So I'd like to entertain a motion to amend the COVID-19 face covering policy.
So moved.
Oh, you have to.
So Bryant made the motion. So
Yeah,
Bryant, you said entertain. So,
Entertain the
so
motion.
you made the motion. So you move. You
I
make
saw-
the motion. Yeah. So you
No.
make the motion to amend the face mask policy.
Yep.
Okay.
And you got to say to reflect that language. So I know.
It's the wording.
Robert's rules, guys.
So I'd like to make a motion, not entertain a motion, right? I'd like to make a motion to amend the the policy for face coverings COVID-19 to reflect the change in language for section 5. Is that good, or do I need to say the entire wording?
I think
Okay.
that's good. All right. And so Glenda, if you want to, your so moved could be a second if you'd like.
Second.
Okay, so seconded by Glenda. Any discussion, questions? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, so the amendment is approved. And now I will entertain a motion to approve the face mask policy
As amended.
as
Motion
amended.
to approve the face mask policy as amended.
Moved by Vice Chair Grace.
Second.
Second, I think I heard Brian's first. Any other comments or discussion? Hearing none. Now all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Great. So the face mask policy has been approved. Thank you all. Item 6 is new business, which is, so item 6A is just a schedule of meetings for 2021. We're voting on this, correct, Dr. Toledo?
Correct. It's a
So-
requirement to post these.
Yeah. I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Motion to approve the 2021 annual calendar.
Motion made by Sonia Gray, Vice Chair Grace.
Second.
A second by Glenda Colon. Any discussion? Brian.
I think at some point there might have been some discussion about having, so I see that there was a monthly meeting, but I wasn't sure if there was actually movement towards having more than one, or if we're just going to continue with the one monthly.
Yeah. No, that's a good question. So I think back in, I think October, we had discussed moving into having meetings twice a month, just so that the board can have public conversations about everything that's happening more frequently, because we felt that was important. And then the holidays hit. And so the Thanksgiving holiday and then the end of the year holidays hit at the end of the month. And so squeezing in 2 meetings in those months is just difficult, right? So I think it's fair to approve the schedule as is, and we can revisit and consider whether we want to move towards 2 meetings at a later date. But for now, these can still be our standard meetings. And I know there is language in the document that says we can add additional meetings, obviously, so long as we don't violate the Open Meetings Act and give notice that we're having an additional meeting. So does that sound okay to everyone? Does anyone have questions or comments on that? Okay. So I have a motion and I have a second. Any other discussion? Great. Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Okay. So the BOT schedule of meetings for 2021 is approved. All right, so now we are moving on to public comment. So for those of you who've been here in the past, what we ask is that if you want to provide public comment, that you add your name to the chat. Everyone should have access to the chat right now to be able to type in your name. If you could type in your name and whether you're a teacher, what's your stakeholder relationship? Are you a teacher? Are you an administrator? Are you a parent? Are you a student? It would be helpful on our end. Thank you, Donna. So what I'm going to do is that as the names come in, I'm going to jot them down. And so if you give me, if you are patient with me while I write down people's names, and then we will begin public comment.
Madam Chair, do you want help bringing people in? since we don't have Michael, or is there someone helping us
Oh,
with
so
that?
yes, actually, the amazing Assistant Principal Hill is here in that
Okay.
capacity. So AP Hill, if you could, as I call people's names, if you could bring them in as, to the panelist side, that would be really, really helpful.
You got it. No problem.
You're
will
killing this, by the way. You're doing a
Will
great
you?
job.
Thank you. Just if you say who is up, who's going to speak next, and then who's on deck, I can move that person to the panelist early, or at least be prepared to.
Okay. Thank you for your patience, everyone. I don't want to start calling names yet because I want to be able to listen and not be writing names while I call people. So, okay, so going back to the top of my list, I have Donna Gatsanella, and Donna is followed by Cheryl Thurber.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Late yesterday, the staff at Veterans School was notified that it was moving to distance learning, at least for the next 3 days, in order to contact trace for 2 positive COVID cases, 1 adult and 1 student. For the first time this year, I felt that appropriate action was taking place at Veterans School. Staff and families were notified of positive cases and a pause was happening. At the same time, I was angry that this has taken that it has taken this long. I know for a fact that there were other cases that should have had the same reaction, but sadly, a gamble was taken, a gamble that could have had different consequences. Thank God it didn't. Our reality as teachers working in the buildings is that students can be asymptomatic, but still positive. This is the fear that we encounter every day as students remove their masks in our classrooms to eat breakfast, lunch, and snacks. This cumulative time can be at minimum 50 to 70 minutes a day. We are being asked to invite distance learning students into the building for testing, instructional, or service purposes. We check temperatures, but that's all we do. It's an added health risk to all of us and a nightmare to keep track of for contact tracing purposes. Attestations are not being faithfully completed by every family each day before their child enters school. The schools are not always being notified of possible positive cases by families or of positive cases by the Department of Health in a timely manner, thus placing others at risk for exposure. There are not enough fellow warriors to cover teacher absences, resulting in the need to use teacher assistants as substitute teachers. I feel this is very important for parents to know. Not all of our distance learners are learning, not because the teachers aren't trying everything that could possibly be done, but simply because the families are not participating. We have many families doing a great job partnering with us to provide the best possible learning experiences in these unprecedented times. But the reality is that we have just as many distant learning students that are not engaged. They are not participating in Google Meets or Zoom meetings. They are not completing assignments. We need your help with accountability for all distance learners. Teachers are held accountable to do their jobs and rightfully should, but so should families and our students be accountable for attendance and completion of work. It takes a whole school community to achieve great goals. So I ask you to join the teachers to make this happen. Protect our health and well-being. Open up the discussion again about moving to distance learning. I hope you will join the teachers also in expecting that all students be accountable for attendance and completion of work. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Donna. Next is Cheryl Thurber, followed by Tracy Kavanaugh.
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. My name is Cheryl Thurber. I am a first grade teacher at Veterans Elementary School. I recently this week sent a letter to all the Board of Trustees members that I know was also shared last week on my behalf by Tracy Kavanaugh. I would like to read my letter out loud just so it's a public record. And I had also added a few things at the end, and I'll read it quickly because I know it's a little lengthy. I'm writing to you as an elementary school teacher at Veterans Elementary School, currently teaching in a hybrid model. And I'm hoping that you will consider the data that other Rhode Island towns are using to switch to distance learning for all grades until at least the end of the year for the safety of all staff and Central Falls families. Woonsocket and West Warwick are the latest districts to switch to full distance learning for all students, using metrics that are considerably lower than ours in Central Falls. Test positivity rate in Woonsocket is 10% and West Warwick is 9%. Central Falls is 24%. This is based on the Rhode Island Department of Health data tracker, and this data is current as of 11/18/20. New York City also switched all students to distance learning, and their positivity rate was 3%. They have since switched to in-person learning. Our teachers are already taking extraordinary measures while also sacrificing their families and themselves for arbitrary metrics of keeping kids in school. In the elementary schools over the last 2 weeks, due to teachers and staff needing to quarantine and typical daily absences of teachers, there have been teacher assistants and lunch assistants covering classrooms for the entire day. There have also been teachers that are not assigned to a classroom covering for a teacher that is out. Staffing classes with non-certified teachers is not more beneficial than allowing a capable teacher to teach from home. It also goes against any idea of a stable pod. Almost all other districts, including Providence, notify families and staff when there has been a confirmed positive case in a school building, which allows families to keep up to date of what is going on in their child's school, as well as to make an informed decision as to whether or not to continue sending their child to school or switch to distance learning. As a parent of 2 children, I made the decision to keep both of my students in full distance learning for the first semester. But I am also notified from my children's school when there is a confirmed positive COVID case in their school. Why is Central Falls not doing this for all families, especially the families that have made the decision to send their children into school? The CDC is now saying the body of evidence is growing that children of all ages are susceptible to SARS-CoV-2 infection, and contrary to early reports, might play a role in transmission, and list in-person learning as high risk. Also, the American Academy of Pediatrics and the Children's Hospital Association released a report this week that found that the coronavirus is infecting children now more than ever. As of November 12th, over 1 million children have tested positive for COVID-19 since the onset of the pandemic. Over the 2 weeks period between October 29th and November 12th, there was a 22% increase in child COVID-19 cases. We have a governor in Rhode Island that constantly lies about the data in regards to infection rate among in-person and distance learning students. Data on the RIDO website shows that as of 11/14, that the cumulative number of school staff that are in person or hybrid that have tested positive is between 525 and 529, while staff that is full virtual is 35 to 39. This clearly shows the real risk to those that are inside of the school buildings. This is real data, not the data that the governor continues to manipulate. Our pre-K to 4 teachers and staff should not be expendable. They are not frontline workers, and schools are not hospitals. They shouldn't be expected to just show up in not nearly the same conditions as a doctor or nurse is prepared to go into every day. Our teachers and staff in grades 5 through 12 have already been given the opportunity to keep themselves safe while teaching and learning from home. Teachers are not babysitters. Yes, parents need to work, but there are alternative options to forcing our educators into that role. Mental health of students and staff is not better when students are in school in these current conditions. Children are not able to socialize with their peers or share with each other. Mass breaks are now canceled, rooms are cold and empty, and kids and staff have to worry about whether or not they're taking home COVID to their families. When school started in September, I felt relatively safe and that my safety and my students' safety was a true concern of the district. As the numbers in the state and specifically Central Falls continue to spike, I no longer feel safe, and I do not feel that my students are safe either. And I do not feel that the school district is taking our safety seriously. Teachers were reassured in September that the safety of students and staff was the #1 priority, and if the safety of all was ever a concern, then other options for learning would be considered. We have most definitely reached this point. Teachers have been contacted by the DOH and told to quarantine, have been told conflicting information from the leadership team, even as far as being told they could come into work if they had a negative test. There are also inconsistencies within the district and even within buildings as to when a class, staff member, or students need to quarantine after being a close contact of a positive or probable case. Some schools have quarantined entire classes along with any staff that has been in the room for one positive COVID case, while other schools have failed to quarantine anyone, even though there have been confirmed cases. Central Falls is not in a good place right now with the spread of COVID and the 24% positivity rate. We're going in the wrong direction quickly, and as long as schools are open, we are sending the social cue that this is okay. People will not stay home, they will not curb the behavior because schools being open shows that things are fine. I hope that you seriously consider the scientific data that we have and not the political pressure, and allow for all students and staff to remain safe and switch to remote learning until the end of the year. And I just added one more thing to my letter. When school started in September, Central Falls had 118 positive cases per 100,000 people. And at the time, this was high, and all precautions and safety measures were said to be in place, so this number would not rise. The state of Rhode Island said that 100 cases per 100,000 was the magic number in order for schools to open fully. Central Falls opened in a partial form due to the current cases at the time of 118 per 100,000. Central Falls, as of 11/21, is at 985 cases per 100,000 people. How much higher does this number have to go for someone to realize the danger we are in? Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. Next, we have Tracy Kavanaugh, and after Tracy, it's Jessica Parkhurst. And if I could ask, we did get a lot of emails, and we're grateful and happy that we received them. I know that I've sent emails to everyone who sent an email, and I've acknowledged, I've read through them. If you could, instead of reading your entire letter, if you could summarize your letter for us, especially if it's that long. We do have a number of people on the list to speak, and so I want to make sure that we don't make the person at the end of the list wait a really long time to share their concerns or their thoughts with us. Thank you. So it's Tracy. Tracy, I think you're next.
Yes,
You're on
good
deck.
evening.
Thanks.
I have actually not prepared anything to read tonight. I have already spoken to Chairwoman Gonzalez and Dr. Toledo about the current situation in Central Falls. But what I am going to ask is that tonight the board listen to the teachers and the support staff that are working in person with our students. You need to hear their struggles, their concerns, and their fears. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. We have Jessica Parkhurst next, and then Jane Canelier. Jessica? Oh, there you are. Okay. Jessica, we can't hear you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jessica Parkhurst. I'm currently learning fully distance and has been since the beginning of the year. I'd like to thank you, Stephanie Gonzalez, for visiting us and joining in our morning meeting. We hope you enjoyed your time. We certainly were happy to have you. I am here tonight to urge you to reconsider any in-person learning at this time. As the cases rise across the state, Central Falls continues to be a hotspot with cases rising daily. At the highest peak in the spring when our schools were closed, the number of cases were per 100,000 were 903. As of yesterday, the number of cases per 100,000 are 841. The percent positive rate is currently 19.1, well over the 1% positivity rate that Dr. Fine said would be the only way we should open it for in-person learning. As we all meet virtually tonight to discuss in-person learning, I am home safe with my family. I'm not worried for their health or safety because I am teaching fully distanced from home and my own children are learning virtually. Sadly, this is not the case for many of my colleagues and so many Central Falls students and families. We must act now in the best interest of all parties involved. No one will ever argue that in-person face-to-face learning isn't the absolute best option for teaching and learning, but in this time and in this moment, we must make the health and safety of all families, faculty, and staff the top priority. The governor is wrong when she tells the public that schools are not spreaders. She has ignored her own metrics and criteria for closing schools. For months, we heard that we must follow the science. When cases around the state increased 2 weeks after Memorial Day, she told us the only thing that changed is that people were out doing things for Memorial Day, and so the cases increased. When the numbers increased statewide 2 weeks after July 4th, she again told us we had to look at what had changed in the last 2 weeks. Now, after 2 months of in-person learning and the numbers skyrocketing to the point that the Cranston Field Hospital now has 9 patients and the Providence Field Hospital has 20 patients, we are ignoring the only thing that has changed. The one thing that has changed from early September to now is that in that time, we opened schools and sent kids and teachers back to school. It is clear the state won't help us keep our families and staff safe. It is up to you to help us stay safe. I'm urging you to take bold action and end all in-person learning for the second quarter. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Jessica. Next is James, and followed by Jordana Ruggieri.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name's
Hello.
Jade. Hi. My name's Jade, and I'm an occupational therapist at Captain Hunt Preschool. In addition, I have 3 preschoolers of my own that are also in a public town preschool. I was in favor of opening schools if it could be done safely, and I believed it would be in the best interest of the children and believe opening was the right choice. However, I do not believe we are now doing what is best for the students of CF. I have many reasons, but I just want to talk about a couple right here very quickly why I believe full distance learning would be best for both students and staff on a temporary basis. First and foremost, I do not think we can keep the staff and CF students safe. I personally do not feel safe going to work. I do not feel safe for many reasons, but especially because I was exposed at work and notified 12 days later. 12 days. You can imagine how I felt that I had been in contact with people in my household that I love that consists of a person with MS and a daughter that is post-RSV. If I had been notified in time, I would have distanced within my household from them. I'm not confident this will not happen again as DOH is so backed up and the numbers continue to rise. In addition, we have many probable cases in our school and parents who refuse to test, and then we continue in those classes as normal. I honestly now live a fear of bringing home the virus unknowingly and passing it on with fatal effects to the people I love. If I had returned from work my 1 day post-quarantine and I had cold-like symptoms, so I stayed home, I would already be quarantined again with another exposure. This brings me to my second point, the inconsistency of treating the in-person students. They are quarantined, I'm quarantined, then they're quarantined again. Setting up distance learning for 1 or 2 weeks does not work. By the time I know they're quarantined, I can't get the parents hooked on for therapy. However, to be really honest, the students I've been seeing virtually weekly all along are making great progress. The parents are learning strategies, feeding techniques, and ways to practice skills with their students throughout the week. I feel like we need some consistency. And then my last point I just want to talk about very quickly is mental health. We keep speaking of the effects of being home on one's mental health, and I agree. As I said, I have 3 preschoolers. I want them in school. But is it healthy for these 3 and 4-year-olds to keep having different staff and teachers? They keep coming to school, then being sent home and coming back. They hear about people being sick, and honestly, they feel the stress as it's tangible in the buildings. In work today, I felt the stress of every teacher as I walked through the building. Not to mention the mental health of staff. I watch my colleagues who are working around the clock doing 2 jobs, and they are the utmost professionals. They work harder than people I've ever seen work at the hospitals I've worked at previously. And these professionals I've seen break into tears in meetings because of fear, sadness, and anxiety of this virus in the district. I watch staff that feel that we are not cared about. I watch them anxiously check the numbers daily that are so high above any threshold we were told that is safe. The high numbers is the elephant in the district that somehow reason we're not talking about. I asked the board, could we please talk about it? Can we talk about distance learning for a 5-week pause? Can we talk about this in-person pause so that we can save lives? That's it. Thank you for hearing my perspective.
Thank you, Jane. Next is Jordana, followed by Ashley Bro.
I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, good evening. The term unprecedented time is a term we have become very familiar with. The statement, schools are not super spreaders, is a phrase that we are hearing far too often. How can a statement be so definitive when it is in regards to something that has never been known before? The data shared tonight is definitive. The week of 4/19 to 4/25, the municipal rate in Central Falls was 877 out of 100,000. That was the highest municipal rate Central Falls saw in the spring. The week of November 8th to November 14th, the municipal rate was 1,083 out of 100,000. Last week, it was 841 out of 100,000. On November 10th, Rhode Island Senate employees were told to work from home because 3 staffers tested positive. On Tuesday, there were 2 positive cases at Ella Risk after doing the pilot asymptomatic testing. Ella Risk is still open. The Rhode Island Supreme Court recently ruled that the February 2021 Rhode Island bar exam will be taken remotely. The order states the health and safety of applicants and staff have remained paramount throughout the court's consideration of how to proceed. However, RIDE is mandating that all schools do in-person access testing between January and March, regardless of the community spread. I know these decisions go beyond the superintendent and the district. I know that they go beyond the board. I know that the state and RIDE control our district, but my question is, why would we ever believe that any decision made by the state and RIDE would be in the best interest of our community when it has never been in our best interest before? Today, as we were finishing the novel we are reading in my 9th grade English class, the main character, who was in a detention center after crossing the border into the United States, said, "We are specks that don't matter to this world. Our lives, our dreams, our families don't matter to this world. Our hearts, our souls, our bodies don't matter to this world. All it wants to do is crush us." As we were discussing the power and sadness of this quote, one student said, "This is kind of like Central Falls. We are a speck that no one cares about. This pandemic is crushing us and no one is doing anything to stop it." Our students, families, and community do matter. They deserve the same protection that our senators, state leaders, and future lawyers are receiving. Our job is doing what is best for our students and community. Our job is not protecting politics. Thank you.
Thank you, Jordana. Next is Ashley Bro, followed by Elizabeth Gorton.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can.
Okay. Good evening. I just have to say something about the face mask policy. Unless you're going to test people before, like students and staff, before you take the face mask off, being alone in a room, because it's still an airborne virus. And with the cases being so high, everybody should have a mask on. So that's something that, you know, I don't really agree with taking your masks off in school with all the probable cases and asymptomatic students and staff that you don't know if they're positive or not. However, on to one of the public comments tonight about communication with positive cases not being informed to parents. I find that not to be true because I get informed of positive cases within the schools, and Dr. Toledo has sent out messages about positive cases in the schools. I am concerned for this district and the way that the high rate of spread is in Central Falls going forward. I do think that a pause would be definitely a good thing, at least till after the holiday break, coming back from vacation. And I know that it's going to probably be difficult because we have the pilot program, which is very good to contain the virus and know who's asymptomatic and who's not. I just think that at this time, having that pause would try to contain it within the community. If we can't get it like contained within the community, I think that it's going to be worse in the schools as it goes forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. Next, we have Elizabeth Gorton, and followed by Sheena Tremblay.
Sorry about that. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, awesome.
I can't. I can't see you though. Don't know where you.
Yeah.
Oh, there you are. There you are. Go ahead.
All right. I know you asked us to keep it short, but it took a lot of courage for me to write this, so I think I'm just going to read the whole thing. I've been a teacher for 6 years, and I'm starting my 4th year as a teacher in Central Falls. More and more often lately, I'm asking myself 2 questions. Why am I going to our state's COVID epicenter each day to teach in person? And who is going to make the decision to transition to distance learning for us? Our city is 1 square mile with over 800 per 100,000 confirmed cases of COVID, and 2 weeks ago that number was over 1,000. We can be sure that there are many more unconfirmed cases. We can also be sure that there are plenty of unconfirmed cases in schools, and that there are asymptomatic children. Why would I believe that there are so many cases in our city, but not in our schools? The concept that children are not spreading the disease is being challenged by recent studies. It's a quote from an article that I also sent to you guys. The chances of a person with coronavirus, regardless of their age, passing it on to a close contact ranges from 2 to 9% in households. The researchers found that children and young adults, who make up 1/3 of COVID cases, were key to transmitting the virus. It is my understanding that for some reason, the data is not showing the cases as being spread in school, but children don't show their symptoms the same way. A child might go days without complaining, but feeling tired or stuffy. Some people I know who tested positive, their only symptoms were nausea and headache. They can be in school for days that aren't being accounted for as the start of symptoms when they receive their positive test. And here's another thing to consider. A family who has a confirmed positive case at home has to quarantine the entire household for 24 days, a privilege that most households in our district cannot afford. Could it be that parents are not reporting the info to RIDO, or that they're too scared to get tested? In the weeks leading up to Thanksgiving, there were confirmed positive cases that occurred in classrooms that I serviced, but I was not notified of them until the child had been absent for weeks. And I was getting notified from like TAs in the room, just like whisperings and rumors, never like an official announcement. In 2 of the classrooms that I serviced last quarter, 2 of my fellow staff members tested positive, and I was not notified until after they returned to work. Apparently, they were not my close contacts, even though I had been in their classrooms for 110 minutes a week, because I wasn't notified. I was shocked. Shouldn't I be notified when a classroom that I've been teaching in has a positive case? No classrooms were quarantined in our building related to those cases, and it was not made clear to anyone why. Last night, my school was closed for the rest of the week while our school completes a thorough contact tracing in relation to a positive case. This is the first time our building has been closed, but to my knowledge, it was not the first positive case in our school. In a community so hard hit by COVID-19, we should be taking extra precautions, not doing the minimum. A temperature check at the door and a Kimbo attestation message are not enough. Districts with fewer cases and more resources are doing more. From working in Central Falls, I have learned to do more with less. We were at our bare bones before COVID happened. I was laid off all summer and brought back the weekend before school started. We started the school year without a budget. We ran a school without a principal. We taught distance learning without computers in 2 distance learning classrooms or without a teacher for most of the entire first quarter. There have been in-person staffing shortages at veterans as well. Teachers, assistants, and lunch aides have been left to sub for classrooms. If we don't have the staff to run, how are we open? I understand that the pilot testing program has begun. I understand that it's imperative to try to keep these students in school for as long as possible. But please ask yourself, do the children, families, and teachers of Central Falls deserve better? I believe that switching to distance learning for the time being until the pace is lower, staff is hired, and procedures are remedied is the right thing to do, especially with the anticipated rise that will inevitably come from Thanksgiving. I know it was last week, but we're going to be seeing the rise in that for a few weeks coming forward. If we were to switch to distance learning until January 19th, it would give us time to get things running more efficiently, and it would avoid us being in person for the rises caused by the holiday season. Thank you for your thoughtful consideration. I really do just want what's safest for our whole school community.
Thank you. Next is Sheena Tremblay, followed by Allison Duarte.
Hi, I'm Sheena. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay. Thank you for allowing me to speak this evening. I would also urge the CF Board of Trustees to make the decision to end in-person learning in Central Falls for the safety and well-being of the students, faculty, staff, and staff at these schools. I am both a hybrid and distance learning teacher. I started the school year coming in 5 days a week because the district, because the district could not provide me with documentation that the building was safe and that we had the proper filters and ventilation. I purchased 2 medical grade air purification systems with HEPA 13 filters for $180. They cover the square footage of my classroom, and I was told this was unnecessary. Yet 8 weeks later, an air purifying system was delivered to my classroom. I also bought a case of paper towels that actually absorb instead of the paper that we're given that pushes liquid around. I purchased 3 packs of Clorox brand wipes because those are the most effective in killing the germs. And I've spent every day cleaning every surface of my room with those wipes. After the 3rd month of school, I'm now out, and that's $257 of my own money that I spent to feel safer. Since we've been in school, the numbers continue to rise. Like others have already stated, we were told a certain percentage that we would end this and go distance, and we still haven't. In the Boston Globe, they reported the last week of October, 152 cases in CF. The first week of November, 141, 205 the second week of November. That's 500 cases before Thanksgiving. Today's number on the RIDO website is 2,666 positive cases in Central Falls, and that gives us a positivity rate even higher than others have mentioned of 26%. In the Boston Globe article, Dr. Fine also pointed out the problems that arise in Central Falls. We are sending people home to isolate, and they're living in a 2-bedroom apartment with anywhere from 6 to 9 people with 1 bathroom. So they're not able to isolate, and so they're spreading it to the whole family or whoever they live with. My biggest concern is the positive cases that we have had in school and the procedures and protocols that have followed. You know that Calcut had positive cases, was closed immediately and disinfected. More recently, they did that same thing at Veterans. At Ella Risk, we've had positive cases that I didn't know existed until I found out from a parent of one of my students who was quarantined for a siblings exposure. So there's cases where we don't even know it's happening. When we did the COVID testing on Tuesday, 2 students tested positive. We were not notified about that until after the school day was over. Our building was not closed down and was not cleaned. Stop signs were put on the doors of these 2 rooms telling us not to enter. I'm concerned about the contact tracing, and the 2 students that with COVID left. The other students remained in the building for the rest of the day, and so did those teachers until they left and got quarantined going forward. I'm concerned about all the areas that they were in, the rooms that the bathrooms, the public areas. We didn't close to clean any of that. On Wednesday, we did the COVID testing again. There was a teacher found to be positive. We were never notified of that. I found that out through the grapevine in school because obviously without HIPAA violation, people can figure things out pretty quickly when someone was there yesterday and no longer there today. So it's obvious people know who it was. I was in contact with that person and I was not ever notified. And maybe because I'm not sure that the contract tracing was as thorough and good as it needs to be. 2 students that today were removed and sent home because they were they were in contact with one of those people, and that contact happened on Tuesday because those students didn't have school on Wednesday. So that's another concern of mine, that the contact tracing at my building, I'm not sure it's being done as good as it should be. The other big issue with the contact tracing is we have many families where it's not just siblings in a household, there can be cousins or other relatives living there. And I just want to be sure that we're actually tracing them back to their households and not just their siblings. We also have students who are siblings with different names. And I'm concerned about all of those pieces because, like I said, we were not closed for any amount of time for that tracing to happen. Now I'm maintaining 2 classrooms, a distance learning and a hybrid teacher. I feel like I am failing my distance learning students on Tuesdays and Thursdays when I'm in the building and cannot support them because I'm teaching. On Wednesdays and Fridays, I'm failing my hybrid kids who have lots of questions because they have trouble working independently, but I'm tied up in Google Meets meetings throughout the day and can only give them a couple of minutes when I have time, if I have time. So I feel like I'm failing 2 classes of kids at the same time, and that it really means both groups are only getting 2 days a week of school. And I look at the curriculum that I'm supposed to teach this year, and I know I'm never going to get through it. So if all of my kids went distance for the time being, I think seeing me 5 days a week would help all of them. We know our governor has made it clear that she is not going to shut down Rhode Island schools, but you as the Central Falls Board of Trustees can do what's right for our students, teachers, and the entire school community, as well as the families of Central Falls. You can send us remote until it's safe for us to return, because every day I go to school, I do not feel safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Shayna. Next, we have Allison Dwart.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, thank you. I was on a few meetings ago to tell you how well my full distance learning class was going. And I wanted to come on to tell you how very successful we have been and how they continue to thrive. I'm impressed daily, but by what my students and families are capable of. I'm very, very proud to have them in my class. And I never thought of myself as lucky for having underlying conditions, but ironically, I am extremely grateful every single day because I'm able to teach continuously, consistently, and safely from my house. I do not have the kind of stress that my colleagues and friends are having. I am so fearful for these people. I want you to please, please, please consider moving them to distance learning. I don't know how they are possibly holding it together. I want to tell you a quick story of what happened to one of my families a couple of weeks ago. On a Friday morning, I get a call through my ESL translator that told me one of my moms called her and she wasn't feeling well. And one of her children was not feeling well. So myself and this other person worked all morning trying to get them tests. The earliest we could get them tested was on a Tuesday afternoon. And yes, we had all the correct numbers. She told us right away on the phone, there's no way I can miss days of work. She's undocumented. She doesn't get sick time. Of course, she can't miss days of work. So she was fearful what would happen if the test was positive. By Sunday, she was so worried that she called her boss and begged her boss that she needed to go back to work, and he said yes. So long story short, on Tuesday, she and her 5 children were tested. Oh, and the grandmother too, were tested. The mom, the grandmother, and 3 of the children were positive, okay? Mom continued to work for the next, she's still working. She never took the time out. And what I need to say about that is thank God these children are distance learning, because if they were not, they would have been in school positive. And I totally understand this mom's situation. There is no way that she could stay home. They wouldn't have an apartment the next day. They wouldn't have food the next day. No fault of hers, And I'm just saying, if this is happening to one of the families, it's happening to many families, many families. So there are children that are in school who are positive, no fault of their own. And again, thank God that these kids were distance learning. I implore you to move to distance learning for the safety of our staff, for the safety of our children. Thank you.
Thank you, Allison. So that wraps up our public comment portion of the agenda. I do want to thank each and every one of you who provided public comment, who read your letters, who expressed your concerns. We heard from other people through email who didn't speak tonight, and their perspective is also something that we are taking into account. And we know this is hard, right? We know that we're going through, a time in our lives that is difficult, and that we are looking at science. And I know Dr. Toledo will share more about how she engages with doctors every day to figure out what it is that we're going to do. And I know that she takes it day by day, and I'm in constant contact with her. But I don't want you all to think that you're being dismissed. This is a tough thing for us to consider. And I honestly just want to say thank you for being here, for tuning in. Even it's almost 2 hours since we've been in this meeting, and I appreciate each and every one of your voices. So we are going to move into the next item on the agenda, which I think is superintendent comment. Yep. So item 8 is superintendent comment. So Dr. Toledo, I will pass it on to you.
Thank you so much. So while I get my screen shared here, I do want to start and pick up pretty much where public comment left off with our COVID updates, of which there are many. So one thing that I think is super important to just share, and I know we don't respond to every public comment, is just I want to make sure everyone knows there's a lot more information than would necessarily reach every staff because of confidentiality. So it was interesting to just hear from a teacher's perspective, and I can reflect on how we can try to maintain confidentiality and share more. But I think there may be some misunderstandings of situations because I actually am very proud of how consistent we've been in our processes. But not every situation warrants the same response. So hopefully through the presentation, that will become more clear, but we can also reflect on ways to give periodic updates of even why we are not taking certain actions maybe. So I just want to start with some data. Something I think is important to share is actually that we have more students who are distance learners who are testing positive and who have had the virus than those who are in person. So yes, we know it's a pandemic, there will be positive cases, but actually the numbers are more than double of our students who are distance learning. The number of classrooms quarantined, just want to note, does not include the decision that we made last night to have vets take a pause and go distance learning for the next 2 days. But thus far, across the 4 schools that were in person learning, we had quarantined 10 classrooms. And 5 of those were actually out of a significant overabundance of caution. I know another overused term during the pandemic, but because we know that Rido is not keeping up with the pace that they once had in terms of informing contacts, we have made the decision to quarantine whole classes when there's any risk of not having all the information yet. So the demand of being put on RIDO has actually caused them to shift contact tracing to districts now. So with us having that role, which was just a pivot in the last week or so, we are holding an even higher standard than RIDO for what we consider a direct contact within CFSD. But there are times where someone has been in contact, but not to the level that would warrant a quarantine. But again, reflecting on those public comments, we can figure out ways to let people know, even when it's not warranted, because it seems like the rumors lead to some misinformation. So today, or as of today, last night, and I think everyone, families, staff, board have all been informed, but we do have veterans on distance learning for today and tomorrow. Monday's always a distance learning day, because it was a unique situation where the staff member had been in multiple classrooms for a considerable amount of time. Again, for the confidentiality of the individual, don't want to go into too much detail, but given the nature of the staff member's work, we felt that, again, it was safer to quarantine those classes and give more time for a thorough contact tracing than could have happened last night. So shared a little bit about student positives to start. Also just want to share data around staff positives. As of midday today, we were at 18 staff positives from early October till now, so not counting anyone who might have had the virus in the spring. So that broke down to 4 aides, 2 administrators, and 12 teachers. But based on RIDO contact tracing, these were all contracted outside of the school. So I think that's important to note as well. We still, to date, have 0 cases of spread in the schools, and 100% of accommodations from staff members who have said, I have a reason I need to work from home, whether medical or family or otherwise, have been granted. So when someone says, I am not safe to be in the schools, or I have this reason I need to have the flexibility, we're really committed to working with the team to make that happen. So just think that's also important to note.
Dr. Toledo, do you mind if I ask a quick question?
Please.
Do you know off the top of your head the breakdown for the staff, whether it's staff who are in person or teaching at a distance?
I was trying to gather that before the board meeting, and don't have the exact breakdown of staff, simply because sometimes I can get it for you, but what I what I know is we actually have had more staff positives who are distance than in person, but I don't have the exact split of those 12 or 18. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it would be helpful.
Okay.
Just to get a clearer picture. And then my other question is, you know, we heard this come up in the public comment as well, but sort of denouncing this argument or this theory that spread in schools doesn't exist. And so when I read, you know, to date, 0 cases of spread in the schools, can you walk us through? I think it's helpful for board members to sort of hear how do we get to that conclusion that
Sure.
0 cases of spread, that there are 0 cases of spread in schools, just so we understand what that means.
Sure. So if in other districts, because you know superintendents are speaking daily, there have been situations where a child comes to school and either didn't know they were positive or knew they were positive, whatever case may be, a student or a staff member is in school and positive, and then the quarantining does not happen. And so actually the positive individual causes another peer or staff member or someone else to become COVID positive as a result of having been with that person. We have not had that happen at all. So even when these 11 students who are in-person learners have had the virus, either through attestation, they have, families have said, oh, they're not feeling well, I'm not sending them to school, or, oh, I got here and I witnessed this happen once at Raices. We did a temperature check. Oops, you actually are running a fever. So sorry you can't come in to school today. Let's get you plugged in with, testing or your pediatrician or whatever the case may be. But of those 11, even the 2 kiddos, so I'll share a little bit more about this in a few moments, but we kicked off asymptomatic testing this week. We're 3 days in and have only had 2 students test positive. So we're at a 1% positivity rate for asymptomatic testing, which is, I actually think is pretty impressive. Good data for sure. And those 2 students did not cause anyone else to get the virus because of them. Even though they were in school, no one else got the virus from them. And obviously that example, I think, it's early, but we quarantined both classes. And so we're not seeing that spread. Does that help clarify?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Okay. There's unfortunately situations where, a whole class or half a class ends up positive because either they're not quarantining or not doing the attestation, or many reasons. Maybe the air filtration's not appropriate. So we're happy to report that all the different layers of defense are working. I do want to just say, though, that it's not that we're opposed to closing schools. Some of the comments made me wonder if someone thinks we're just staying open because we are, unwilling to consider another option. And I just want to say very publicly to families and staff that this is a decision we make every day, based on the information we have, based on the conversations that I have with medical professionals. And we're really watching internal data, external data, and weighing many, many factors to decide, are kids and staff safe? And if so, then we can keep learning. Great. So spoke a little bit about this, but did want to say more that at Ella Risk on Tuesday and Wednesday, and then today and tomorrow at Raices, we started our asymptomatic COVID testing pilot. So want to just thank all the brave students and staff who got tested. Huge thanks to both principals for their leadership in being the first school in the state and one of the first schools in the country to do this. It's just another layer of protection to make sure that we are keeping students and staff healthy and schools safe. I want to invite Dr. Comet. He's here on the panel to just share a little bit more, in case anyone didn't see him on the news, to just give an update on how that testing went. Buddy, are you still here on the panel?
Yeah, thanks,
Okay.
Dr. Toledo. Good evening, everyone. I'm really actually happy to be able to speak tonight on the pilot program that we did earlier this week. I'll give you a little bit of data, but I mostly want to talk about the kids and the families that made it happen. So we tested 103 students at Ella Risk over the course of 2 days. Of the students that were in person, in other words, enrolled in person and present one of those 2 days or both, there are 169 that were present and 103 got tested. So that was 61% of the students that were tested and had permission to be tested. The total positive Binax test, that's the rapid test that we did. We did 2 tests, the PCR and the rapid test. 2 students tested positive, and as Dr. Toledo mentioned, we moved very swiftly to isolate those classes, contact all of the families, and every family at some point during the day came in to pick up their child and to make sure that they understood what was happening and what they needed to do to keep everybody in their family as safe as possible. So adults, we had 79 adults tested over 2 days, and the Binax test turned up positive on one of the adults. So between both groups, we had 182 tests, 3 positives, which is a 1.6 positive rate, 1.6% positive rate. So that's the data that we have that's real, that's accurate, and that's actual, and that we collected in our school this week. But what I want to talk about is our kids, and how, you know, I was driving home the first day, Tuesday after testing, and it really hit me. You know, I thought about being, you know, 5 to 9 years old, and going into school and having a medical procedure without my parent. And I thought about the gravity of that. And I thought, wow, you know, literally kindergarten through grade 4, kids just walked up one after another, took their bag of testing materials, listened very carefully to, you know, what everybody was telling them to do. And they were just so amazing and brave, and just like, they just walked through it so stoically. And I was thinking, you know, the parents, and think about being the parent who's at home saying, yes, you can do a medical procedure on my child and I'm not going to be there. And, you know, the amount of trust and faith in our school, in our community, in the education system, all of that, it just really hit me when I was driving home Tuesday and Wednesday both. It really was powerful for me as a person who's in a position to, like Dr. Toledo, to have to really think about, you know, is it right for us to be open today? Every single day, every night we go home with that and think about, is it, you know, are we making the right decision? I have not once left the day thinking we made the wrong decision that day, and I hope I never have to. The reality is I understand the weight of these decisions. It's a very big thing, but you know, we are the community and the school that stepped up a little bit for science, a little bit for finding ways to get more and more people tested so that we can prevent spread of asymptomatic people. But I am happy to report that we didn't have a lot of positive cases. We had 3 out of 182 through the rapid test. I'm still waiting for full confirmation on the PCR tests, but at the very most right now, it's looking like 4 possible from the PCR total. And so that is a really awesome result. And I know I'm talking a lot, but I also wanted to say shout out to our team. We had an awesome team working in the testing area, primarily led by Lesden Salazar. And I just wanted to say her name because it was so nice to work with her again. You know, we work really well together, and I've missed her, and it was really nice to work with her again. But I also want to shout out to Esley Ellenwood and to Genesis Garcia, because the 3 of them really with some direction, but basically they started with an idea and they refined a process that will now be used very likely in its you know, after 2-day form through the state. I'm sure it will be refined over and over, but I think the core of it they really created as the foundation of a process that may be used throughout the state to test asymptomatic folks in school. So that's what I have to say. I want to thank the families for giving permission and for the students for just stepping up and being so brave and keeping our school safe. So thanks.
Thank you. I have a follow-up question, if that's okay with you, Dr. Comment. First of all, congratulations, you're making history, right?
Yeah.
In having your school and your school community pilot this. My question is around the permission slip. So are we asking parents to authorize the test every single time, or are we asking them to authorize for as long as this continues?
No, so what we did this time, this is the way it was developed for this particular pilot is that it's a one-time event. And so in the event that the state or our district starts to implement ongoing testing, I think we would have to look at what the permission looks like. But for this particular time, families were giving permission for this particular, the 2 tests that we did those days.
And so for the parents that didn't give permission, how are we ensuring that we get their permission? Right, just worried about not having everyone who comes into the school actually get tested.
Yeah, so I can only speak to that because of the process this time. So this was a pilot. It was in a way, it's like with a pilot, it's okay as long as you get a certain percentage. You can't just have 10%. That's not going to give you enough data. But as long as you have a good solid number of actual data points, it's okay that it wasn't everyone this time. But I agree with you. In the future, in the event that we decide to implement ongoing testing, I think there would have to be some discussion around whether it's voluntary, whether it's policy, how we want to move forward with that. But I can say that we did get response and permission on, kind of relatively short notice. Parents didn't have a lot of time. So please don't think that parents who didn't give permission, and I want to say this very clearly, it doesn't mean they didn't want to. We had very short window because it was all the agencies working together with the district for the first time on something like this, that each thing took a while to create and to develop, and the permissions were a part of that whole process. But I can say that that we would definitely have to decide how we follow up when we're not hearing back. In this particular case, there wasn't really actually time to do that to any large degree. However, we could at this point follow up with families that we didn't hear back from and find out if there was a reason. It was the actual request went out, and it was worded in a way that people who didn't want to give permission, they didn't actually have to respond. And so in this particular case, it's hard to tell if people didn't respond. You can't surmise that they didn't want their child tested. Some people may not have received it. If the phone number wasn't matching up, I used the Kinvo system. And so we can't draw conclusions yet until I talk directly to families that didn't give permission.
There were also a few examples from families who opted out that I think may be more open in the long term. So in this pilot, in order to get reliability data on the effectiveness of the rapid, we were also doing a PCR. So that was being sent off to the lab. In the long term, it would just be the rapid. So when this scales statewide, it would just be the rapid. And so I think for 2 reasons that we heard just anecdotally from families. One is not everyone was comfortable with their child's information going off to the lab and sort of being tracked in that sort of way, or just having a lot of wonderings around that, not going through their doctor's office, understandably, just very different than a typical medical procedure. And then the second piece was that even though our PCRs were not the nasopharyngeal, which everyone references tickling the brain. I think people associate it with that more painful procedure. And so I know certainly as a parent, the thought of a possibly painful procedure happening may cause me to have pause, whereas in the future, we can message that it'll just be the very lower nasal region. As I didn't think about when I handed over the mic to Buddy that we'd be paused on me getting my swab here so long, but we were trying to have as many adults model for kids that it really truly was not at all painful.
Yeah, and I do want to say too that with our staff, we had 75 staff that work in the school on a regular basis. Not all are directly employed by Central Falls Schools, but most are. And so, but out of the staff that were present on those 2 days, all with the exception of 3 were tested. And again, I can't say anything about why or why not, but I can say that almost everybody in our staff was tested in those 2 days as well. So we have a pretty good, from that snapshot in time, a pretty good idea of our asymptomatic kind of status right now, which is really good to know, especially going into holiday season. I think people were actually pleased to be able to get tested so that they would know either maybe they did or didn't have transmission during Thanksgiving, or that coming up to the winter break, if they're isolating and keeping themselves socially distant from now until then, that they feel a little more confident that they're not going to be a transmitter as well. So I think all in all, it was a really good experience, and I'm really happy that Ella Risk was able to represent Central Falls and help build and refine the process for the future as well. So thanks.
Thanks, Dr. Comet.
Thank you.
And thank you for really emphasizing how that beautiful reflection of how for families to trust the school, but also to value in-person learning so much, to be willing to have their child go through that was a beautiful reflection. So thank you. Were there other questions before we proceed with updates? Okay.
Any questions? No.
So the other update on this slide, again, another layer of protection for when it is safe to have schools open, is that we, the state actually purchased for us an air purifier for every single classroom. So this was referenced in the public comment. And so we feel fortunate that even though we already had the filters in place to get the required level of air changes per hour, we now can go significantly above that. And as the cold weather comes, these can actually allow us to close windows and still be doing the appropriate number of air changes per hour, which I know is a very understandable concern as the colder New England months approach. Moving on. I do want to be as transparent as possible as to how we can make these considerations, because I think maybe people think we're not considering if we need to have full distance learning. So one thing that was referenced earlier, but just want to reiterate, a day has not gone by where I don't speak with a medical doctor to learn new information, be updated on the latest research, or ask advice. So multiple Rido doctors, Dr. Alexander Scott directly has spoken with us. I speak with Dr. Chan from Rido almost daily. Dr. Fine is so kind to always be on speed dial. And Dr. Jha, who is now at Brown, but is also often on the Today Show speaking about these issues nationally. They have all made themselves accessible, and we're so grateful for it. That expertise is so valuable, and I think gives me a lot of confidence in being able to say, yeah, we can have schools open. But I do wonder if there might be opportunities for them to speak with staff and families, anyone who has more reservations, because I do think that's a great privilege that I have to hear that update directly, and can try to figure out ways to make sure that that same confidence is shared with everyone. Currently, in this moment, there's sort of three main considerations that we're looking at with whether schools are to be open or closed. One are these like unique cases, like the decision to have veterans go off into distance learning for a few days because of the role of the staff member having had so much contact with so many different pods, which we obviously try to minimize. The second big thing is the holidays. So just to sort of pull back the curtain on what a whiteboard looks like in Jay's office right now, it's like thinking about, all right, when we get a call from a family or from RIDO, we are figuring out when did they become symptomatic and tracing back to determine what was the window where they were symptomatic, when might they have had exposure, who else would have then possibly been with them. And so these red days are the 4 days where there was heightened risk of exposure, because we know that some people did choose to gather over the Thanksgiving holiday. And so we are very closely following the window of when we would anticipate possibly seeing the impact of that. And it was not a coincidence that we worked to align the testing pilot with when we would imagine seeing an increase of cases given the holiday, and even the possibility of kids being asymptomatic positives was why it made a lot of sense to test now. So as Buddy just shared, went very smoothly at El-Risk. Day one today at Raices had 0 positives on the rapids. They'll test again tomorrow with their B-Day kids. And during this meeting, I got confirmation, very excited from RIDO, that they were so impressed with our team that Buddy was giving shout outs to, and also want to say to Marie Grist, our head nurse, who was also a big part of that. The team from RIDO was so impressed with our CFSD team that we've been given the green light to receive the rapids and run the operation without the need for the people from RIDO to sort of supervise. So we will be able to test next week at Vets and Hunt, the other 2 schools that currently have in-person learners. Obviously, we need to finish out the contact tracing from the situation at Vets and make a decision as to whether they will in fact open on Tuesday for in-person. But if they do, we'll be able to bring everyone back by having the rapid test opportunity. So that we feel like is a really great way when we reopen doors to do so. The sort of last piece around COVID that I just wanted to share, because we did start seeing an influx of emails that were giving feedback in both directions, I'll say. And certainly the trend in public comment has been more voices from staff than families, though appreciated hearing from Ms. Bowe tonight, but also more along the lines of closing than open. And so I just quickly made this bar graph, and these are only people who reached out to me. And it is not to say everyone needs to reach out, but I just thought it was important to name that when we hear from families, families are saying, thank you for being open. We haven't had any family who says, please shift to DL. And when there's an individual case of a family who wants to do that, we shift the student to DL. So that choice, you know, it can't always happen in a moment in the other direction, but we absolutely take family choice still into consideration. And then just thought it was worth noting that there are some teachers who are already full distance who are advocating for full distance, and so separated out teachers who are already DL versus teachers who are in person. And I just think it's interesting to note that we do hear from teachers who are in person saying, please stay open. This is working for kids. So just wanted it to be on the record that we don't hear just one feedback in one direction. Okay, shifting away from COVID. So maybe pause there in case there's any COVID related questions.
Questions from other board members? Just looking at, scrolling through your images, not seeing anything right now. This is a quick question back to the pilot. Will families be notified, or have they been notified of what we've found, or how will that be communicated?
Yeah, we actually are waiting to have all the PCR data back, was what RIDO's recommendation was, because there certainly could be different, the effectiveness and the reliability of the PCRs is higher thus far than rapids, but as the information we have so far, there has only been one positive. When Buddy referenced the 3 positive PCRs, 2 of those were also positive on their rapid. So it was only 1 false negative on the rapid. But it seemed wise to wait until we have that data back. But thankfully, that's being turned around a lot faster through our internal testing than if you were to go to, a site at your Stop and Shop or some other location across the state for testing. So we started seeing those results within 24 hours.
I have a question regarding the asymptomatic COVID testing. So I know that this was I guess a one-time thing for the time being, dependent on funding from RIDO. Now my question is there a way of advocating for, depending on what the decision looks like for distance learning versus in person, right? Up until the new year, of having something like this again after the new year, because not only will we have, Christmas, we will also have the new year. So thinking I guess being proactive about that and seeing if there's a way for us to advocate for that.
I love that idea. And actually not to speak out of turn, but my understanding is that is the goal for much broader than just CF, is that by the time the state is coming back from the winter break, that many schools would be able to do those rapids for that very reason. But we've been given reason to believe that we will have priority access to the testing because of our community having a higher impact right now. Mm-hmm.
I have a question. Well, a suggestion. Thank you, Dr. Toledo, for mentioning that, everybody needs to be accounted for when we look at, making a decision. I was in several meetings today with Dr. Pies. I attended the 10 a.m. and the 4 p.m. where a lot of parents spoke, and the feedback was great. A lot of parents, I feel that their children are safe at our schools. There was one parent who absolutely applauded the Ella-Risk team today. And that was so nice to hear. So my suggestion is, can we do a new survey just to know where our parents stand? Dr. Pai said today, we're like a triangle and we have to cover all 3 corners in order to make a decision. And that stuck with me. So I feel like if we could do a new survey asking if they feel their children are safe in schools, and getting that feedback from our families would be very important, especially for me. It's huge. I know that someone said that parents are not worried about their children and distance learning, and I take huge offense to that, because I have witnessed parents fight for their children to get Chromebooks since day 1 back in the spring until now, and they continue to fight. So I would love positive suggestions rather than pointing fingers, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Gwendolyn, for calling that out. I too heard it, and it's pretty it's disappointing at best to hear that kind of commentary on top of some others. But to your point about the surveys, you know, we relied on survey data not just from parents and but also from teachers prior to our decision for the beginning of the year. And so I think sort of just want to echo Gwendolyn's suggestion about the surveying of our stakeholders. Thanks, Gwendolyn, for bringing it up.
I get it. We're not where we were in the beginning of the year. We are not. And I want to, you know, reassure these teachers that we are listening. All of us read every single email and we are listening. However, we need to make sure that we are reaching out to all of our parents and that our students' needs are being met.
I have another question. So this is more like generally thinking about like testing in the community. I know, I believe I saw it on the website for veterans that there was the testing going on at Calca last week. But I'm just wondering if there's been any kind of communication to parents about how it's still going on. Like, I know I went today to get tested just because I was like, oh, why not, right? But it is still going on. I think it said like 1 to 5, but I wanted to make sure that that's still being communicated since, you know, I know some folks are like unsure about how vets looks like next week, or like maybe they want to get tested again, or, you know, for whatever reason.
Yeah, board member Colon and I messaged back and forth about this quite a bit because the National Guard stood up that testing site without a lot of specifics, and then we messaged to families and then they weren't open, and so we've been a little, to be honest, hesitant to re-message because over Thanksgiving we were just flooded with families who were saying, I'm outside of Calcut and they're not open. So we've given that feedback to the National Guard and asked for a lot more clarification on hours, but also on this like rumored pivot. Are we still walk-in? Are we going to appointment? Right now it says they're both. So appreciate the feedback, and we will, as soon as we have something confirmed, we'll make sure that families know about it.
Great, thank you. Good questions, everyone. Wanting to make sure that some other stakeholders, board members who may have questions. Okay, Dr. Toledo, I think you're good to proceed. We'll stop you if we have a question.
Okay, shifting out of COVID land here. Just wanted to give some other high level.
Are we shifting out of COVID land?
I was.
So I do have a quick question on attestation. So just again, I mean, really a lot of the questions that board members are asking have come up because of the public comments. So we are being receptive to some of the things that are coming up and being, you know, making sure that we are informing ourselves of what's happening. So I want to understand the attestation process a little bit more. Is it required before a child comes into the school? You know, what happens if a parent doesn't do the attestation? Just want to get a better sense for what that looks like, because listening to some of what's being said, it distorts, I think, what reality might be. And so I want to just understand what's happening.
Yeah, so let me lead by being super transparent that we had our first hiccup with attestation this week. So I don't want to ever make it sound like we've got everything perfectly figured out. So we use Kinvo, which is the opportunity to use text messaging. It automatically translates and it's two-way communication. So it's a consistent auto sent message. We program it to be sent every day to families, and they need to respond confirming that the child does not have symptoms. The process is supposed to run that if you don't hear back from a family, that then the child is not coming into school, but we are proactively reaching out and trying to find out. Or if the family responds that the child is symptomatic, we initiate a level of support with the homeschool liaison or someone else in the family team to make sure that the family is getting connected to testing, et cetera. But because this is the first year we're using Kinvo, we didn't know that at the end of a quarter, any auto recurring messages that had been set up stopped sending. So actually want to huge thank you to Miss Thurber, who caught this when she said my Kinvos aren't going out, my attestation's not going out, which led us to raise it to Kinvo. And they said, oh, well, at the quarter, we assume that, you know, teachers are taking on new classes or new messages would need to be updated, but they've never run this, you know, through a pandemic when there actually is a need for that consistency. So all that to say, we learned a lot this week and are working with Kinvo to remove that that block at the transition, but also now are aware. But normally that is the process where families get a consistent message each morning at the same time, and then message back either attesting to no symptoms or notifying that the child would not be attending because they are symptomatic. But then once they get to school, we still do the temperature check as another layer.
And so just to be like 100% clear, we hear from every parent before that child walks into our schools.
Yeah, and we do that at the teacher level. So a teacher would receive those messages back, and he or she would then reach out or notify the office of who needs to be called. But students would not come in if they hadn't attested, if their family had not attested.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Just, Sabrina, we're going to talk about, and we mentioned it a little bit, I think the previous meeting, just sort of how students are doing, end of quarter data. Is that coming out? Is that going to?
Yes.
Okay.
Though I am recognizing it's 8 o'clock and people might be fading, so I'll try to be concise.
No, it's okay. I just wasn't sure because it's related to distance learning. And so I wasn't sure how you were separating the COVID information from student information. So I just wanted to see if it was coming as we are switching to strategic planning.
Yes, it's still forthcoming.
That's fine.
Okay. And really the update on strategic planning, because I had said at the last meeting, maybe I could bring you a proposal in December, but we had an interesting thing happen since then where we were approached by a funder that we've already been working with, who said, you know, we're working with a lot of community-based organizations in the greater CF Providence area. We've been working with you and like what you're doing and are interested in supporting the collaboration over the next 3 years. So this is not done and done, but it is very likely. And the 4 organizations are Progreso Latino, Equity Institute, PLE, Parents Leading for Educational Equity, and Diversity Talks, all 4 of which we already feel so grateful to be collaborating with. And so all this to say, if we do get this support, then one of the conversations we've been having with the Equity Institute, even pre-pandemic, is having them support a process of really genuinely engaging all stakeholders to develop an equity-driven strategic plan. So really, it's an update that there is an amount of support that's likely coming, but also why it would be my recommendation that we wait and see if this grant is awarded rather than launch a strategic planning process when we might have a lot of expertise on the way. But also know, especially you, Vice Chair Grace, had said you had some input on how we think about this, and so wanted to open that up to hear board feedback on strategic planning.
Oh, I mean, sounds interesting. I think any support that comes in and having it be community collaborative, right? So is Central Falls School District as a member of the Central Falls community is important. So I think we can wait and see what it comes out of it. Sounds definitely interesting.
Okay. Hopefully we'll have more updates by the January meeting, but we'll keep everyone posted. In that same vein of other possible grants, just wanted to let everyone in the community and the board know that we have applied for some others, but also been awarded. So the Nellie Mae Education Foundation is the funder for the work that I was just talking about, which would be 3 years of support with those 4 community-based organizations. We also today applied for a grant that would enable us to support students while also creating and designing more of a pipeline to create more opportunities to work in the district for members of the CF community. So we're super excited about that and should hear in the next couple of weeks, so we'll keep you posted. And then we have already been awarded, and want to thank Principal McCarthy who did this application that was awarded through Prepare RI, where we actually will be funded to have an additional school counselor over the next 3 years. So really excited about all those possibilities that we can support students through that additional team member. So at the last meeting, we talked about having both quantitative and qualitative ways to start talking about, like, where are our students, what has been the impact of the pandemic, and what did the first quarter sort of show us. And so I have very high level updates. I think what is important to note is that given that we didn't have devices in the hands of so many of our students for the first good chunk of the first quarter, that significantly impacted even the rate that we were able to complete these beginning of year assessments. So by the next meeting, we'll be able to show more of what has the growth looked like, whereas in a typical year, by a December meeting, I'd be able to say, wow, we've already seen, so much growth. And the data we were seeing is more reflective of, honestly, the growth is aligned to the amount of time since our younger students have received their Chromebooks, which I think is worth noting. The data, though, what I think is interesting, so what we're looking at here is from a platform called School Pace, which is where we track our literacy growth and progress towards proficiency for students K to 6. And it actually is pretty on par with where we were a year ago. So that was interesting, that we do know there has been some regression, but also it's not uncharted territory. We have closed gaps such as this before, and through the comprehensive literacy grant that we received both for pre-K and for K to 5, we now have high quality curricular resources in all of those classrooms. And so we're super excited to see how, even through the challenges of the COVID context of learning, that kids do now have, and teachers have access to higher quality curricular resources than we've had in a very long time. So all that to say, I kept the same goal for us as a district that we had last year, which is to get that emergency group of students to be less than 15% of our students. So right now we're at 37%, bring that to under 15, and that the percentage of proficient or above readers, so the green that's currently 13, that we would get above 50%. So it's ambitious, but it's achievable. So we'll keep you posted on how that goes. So while this is just an example, again, of sort of K to 6 literacy, district-wide, we also administered the STAR assessment. And so this is just one example reporting out. This is 11th grade English, but STAR is given both for ELA and math. And so we were able to capture this data. We have historically done this assessment, but it's worth noting that this is the first year that RIDE is collecting it. I think the main driver was because they did not administer the RICAS. They required every district to pick one of 4 assessments to do internally and report out 3 times a year. And then they paid for the assessment where usually it would be coming out of our operating budget. But we certainly are at the high school, seeing trends. The older the student, the larger the gaps that we are seeing as an impact from the pandemic, for sure. And so I know we've had some conversations, various board members have reached out since the last meeting around, students who are struggling to engage. And so we have been doing a lot of work and want to just really praise the high school principal leadership team. So, team of teacher leaders and school leaders who have been doing focus groups with students and families and really trying to gain more information about how we can re-engage those students who are really struggling, not just to attend, but also to sort of thrive. So the first quarter data is dire. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, but it's causing us to pause and think about what shifts we might need to make. So one of the things that the high school is looking at is, how they might even want to think about their schedule differently, so that, hearing from students saying, straight synchronous learning is really challenging for me, and I would do better if I had some time on the screen and some time off. And so we're really trying to hear from students about what's working and what's not, and then ways to ensure a more equity-driven approach to re-engaging students, so that everyone's not just receiving the exact same support, but rather differentiating so that those students who need more support can get more. So the high school team is leading a process now to consider a bunch of different schedules. And so we'll have updates on that. Same instructional minutes with each schedule, but just trying to be innovative in how it's delivered. Just a few tech updates, but they are tied to the learning. We have seen an uptick in, well, first, just students who got access to devices. So that was huge. And then from that, we now are finally seeing data that shows us consistently that all students are engaging. So even when we look at the use of Chromebook over an extended period, so multi-day period, we're finally hitting that target of all the students in the district. So 2,600 kids as of mid-November were using their devices. And so it's just exciting to see that once we were able to give kids access, they were able to engage a lot more. We did upgrade our Google learning management system to be able to get our teachers a lot more features, and hoping that that will make distance instruction go a lot smoother as well. And then the last update, just as of this week, we got the good news from the school building authority that our stage 2 that we submitted was approved. And so that is an approval for $7.7 million of improvements. So we're excited to get that started and already thinking about future submissions, just to continuously improve our physical buildings as well. Pause for any questions. Okay, thank you all so much.
Wait, just real quick, can you go back? I just want to see the email for tech support for the
yeah.
system. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and actually, I will make sure to send this out, both the email and the phone number, because we had heard that some people were not able to get through on the phone number, and so I want to make sure that everyone has it. So 401-919-2367. And we have shifted the tech support to the McKenna Center. So anyone could go there for tech help in person or Chromebook pickup 9 to 2 every day. We have someone who's right there at the window. But of course, given the pandemic, if you can walk through by phone, that's obviously the safest way to do so. Okay, believe
Is
that.
that
Yep,
at the end?
that
Dr.
is.
Toledo? Okay. Any other questions for Dr. Toledo before we move on? Okay, so we are moving on to board comment. Any board comment? Not seeing any. All right, so our final item is adjournment. I make a motion to, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting at 8:15 p.m.
Motion to adjourn the meeting at 8:15 p.m.
Motion made by Brian Estrada,
Second.
second by Hugo Figueroa. Thanks everyone so much. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Bye.